To lead us in the session, Sharing Our Pride, Identity, and the Power of Inclusivity, please welcome Accenture's Managing Director of Interactive, Mr. Jamie Roman.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you, High Tech, for inviting me to participate in this awesome forum and for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel discussion. And thanks to the audience, thanks to all of you for being here and your interest in this topic. This session is about the intersectionality of our LGBTQ plus and Latinx communities. I'm super excited to be here. This is such an important conversation, and I hope that we will leave inspired and energized to become a champion for inclusivity, or if we're already champions for that, to do even more. I'm honored to be sharing this virtual stage with a distinguished panel of leaders who will be sharing their personal journeys with us throughout this session. Thank you, panelists, for making time for this important conversation. I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves as I call them out for questions. But first, before we get started, I want to share a little bit more about myself. Managing Director from Accenture. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, La Isla del Encanto. Back in 1988, I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, in which I thought was going to be a 5-year thing. And then I was going to move to New York or LA. But, you know, this many years later, I'm still here. And I actually love Minneapolis. It's a great city. And I love it because it's the city in which I became the man that I am today. You know, it's very progressive. It has a history of embracing the LGBTQ plus community. And, you know, one of the biggest pride festivals in the nation. And, you know, it is actually the first U.S. Supreme Court case that was heard about marriage equality started because of a couple in Minneapolis back in 1970 that wanted to get married. One of the guys was so passionate about this that he actually went to law school to prepare to change the laws of the land. That case went nowhere, but it planted the seed that eventually germinated. Unfortunately, that progressiveness for the LGBTQ plus community hasn't really translated for equity, equality. There's a lot of systemic racism, you know, economic and racial disparities that have permeated that, you know, systemic racism culminated in the unfortunate killing of George Floyd. And, you know, the last year in Minneapolis, it's been hard. You know, we've been really shocked about what's going on, and it's just torn the community apart. But I am so hopeful. I have full confidence in my community, and I know that Minneapolis will rise from the ashes even better than it was before. And it's not only going to be a great place to live for white people, but it's going to be a great place to live for everybody. So a little bit more about myself. I'm married to my wonderful husband, Jim. He's a white boy from Wisconsin, grew up in a dairy farm. We met the old-fashioned way in a gay bar. We've been married for 5 years. We've known each other for 10 years now. We have 3 wonderful sons. My oldest son, Sebastian, is about to get married. He's getting married on July 3rd. So we are all super excited and, you know, working towards making sure that that wedding is great. You know how it is to have gay dads. So again, those are my biological children. My journey, as I mentioned, Puerto Rican, grew up in a very conservative, very Catholic family. My father, as many, you know, Latin men of that generation, very homophobic. You know, and I'm a people pleaser by nature, and I love my family, and I wanted to make them proud. So I chose to hide who I was. I chose to be somebody else that I thought my family wanted me to be. Ended up marrying my college sweetheart and, you know, having kids and being somebody that I thought everybody wanted me to be. You know, like we all know that those of us that have lived through that situation is not a healthy thing to do. But it only took my father's sudden death for me to realize, look myself in the mirror and say, hey, you cannot be a good father. You cannot be a good husband. You cannot be a good son or brother or leader if you are not an authentic person. So, I came out loud and I came out proud and have never looked back. So, so happy to be here sharing with all you. But enough about me. I'm gonna engage now with our panel. And as I said before, we want to share our stories. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with one question that I'm gonna ask each one of you. So telling stories is a powerful way, right? As I said before, to connect, to educate, to inspire. So I would like for each one of you to first introduce yourself and then to tell us a little bit about your journey. Why are you here? Why is this so important to you? What message would you like to leave with this audience? So why don't we start with Tahar?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tajaro Martinez. I am the CEO and founder of Cyber Warfighters Group, a cybersecurity company. My background, I am Afro-Cuban. My father is from Saguara Grande, and I have family in Santa Clara, and folks are in the DR. I am first generation born in New York City, Brooklyn, Flatbush, and along my journey, it was basically, I was born a crime on so many levels. Coming from a very religious home, you don't even have relations outside of marriage. So I was married at 17 and a half. It's to that level. And I wanted to go to college, and I've served our country for over 22 years. Again, in that environment, it was illegal to be who we were. You would go in federal prison. Fast forward, my wife, who is a Marine, once a Marine, always Marine, she too understands that she was born a crime, if you will, not only in society, in our Hispanic community, where it's just shunned upon. Let's call a thing a thing. We connected just fast forward after I retired. We met after the military. And so along that journey of hiding, to what you were saying, Jamie, hiding who you are in your community, in your church. I too married, have 2 children, 2 biological children, married to a preacher because that is the Spanish respectable way. Just living, it's no other way to put it, living a lie that was forced upon me by circumstance. And today, fast forward, I am my full authentic self unapologetically. Instead of, and I love the topic that we're talking, I just say that I am, because there are so many boxes, from veteran to woman to Afro-Latina to you name it, women-owned business, I am. And so here at High Tech, why I reached out to High Tech and I was invited here was even within our Latinx community, unfortunately, there's still a divide. And it's more specific to me in Cuba, why my family left. Being dark or Afro-Cuban, there's a divide. And so in order for us to heal as a nation, we have to heal within our community ourselves and bridge that divide within our own culture. And then we can spread the love throughout. I'm here to put a face to when folks see in the great state that I am in, Texas, when folks see Hispanic, they don't see me and they forget about what's south of the equator. They don't see Panama and all these great countries and cultures and these veterans who serve. And so I'm just super excited to call High Tech home and shoulder up each other and foster the bridges that I've made, make it easier and shoulder up the next generation and create a pipeline to their success. That is why I'm here.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Tahar. It's funny because you mentioned as part of your response that having a family was the only way. Actually, my grandmother had other ideas for me when I was a little kid. She told me, I think you should be a priest. And even though when I came out, everybody said, oh my God, this was such a surprise. I think my grandmother knew, and she was steering me towards the traditional, home, respectable home for gay sons. But, I really wanted a family, so I definitely opted against that. Same question. Thank you, Tahar, again. Same question. So why don't we go with James?
I mean, you're talking about abuelas and you're going to make me cry. That's the quickest way to my heart. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching us from. My name is James. I use he, him pronouns. And for a visual descriptor, I am a light-skinned Latinx male with dark hair, glasses, standing against a fake backdrop in my pandemic garage in the beautiful city of San Francisco. I want to say thank you to Accenture and thank you to High Tech, and most of all, thank you to the panelists and all of you who are watching right now, because I know in this crazy quarantine pandemic world that we're living in, the stress and the demands on our time are so great. And so that you took the time to be here with us right now is just such an honor and a privilege. A little bit about me. I was actually born and raised in the Central Valley of California. And if you know that part of the state, you know it's known for two things, for agriculture and for immigrants. I was more or less raised on the Nia my abuela because my dad was in the fields, and my mom had this radical idea that she would go to college and have a career, which for a Mexican woman back then was just completely unheard of. But you know, it weighs on me to this day that my childhood was marked by a time where it was just deeply unpopular to be Latinx. And because of my light skin, it was very easy for me to learn to hide at a very early age. And you know, for better or for worse, that skill would come in really handy as I hit high school, because I would start to come to terms with my sexuality. And the only thing, you know, a closeted queer Latinx kid in, you know, farm town of Central California knew about gay people was what he heard at church or what he saw on the TV news at home. And the clergy would tell us that gay people were an abomination that would burn in hell. And the TV news told us that gay people were monsters because it was the height of the AIDS epidemic. And so everywhere I looked, I was taught to hate myself and to fear what I represented. And that was loud and relentless. And, you know, it wasn't until I first stepped foot on the Berkeley campus that for the very first time in my life, I saw an example of someone showing up as their full authentic self. Because before that, I didn't even know it was possible. I had seen no real examples of someone doing that unapologetically. And that did two things for me. That gave me permission and that gave me power. And now, of course, only with the benefit of retrospect, I realize that I have spent most of my life cultivating permission and power in other people while simultaneously working to reimagine the systems that ever required that to be necessary to begin with. And I share that very intentionally because if you're watching right now, you may at some point in your life, or even right now, struggled with fitting in. And I want to implore you in this moment to just don't. You were not put on this earth to fit in and look like everyone else and be like everyone else. You were put on this earth because of your differences. Your differences are your superpowers. And you should unleash those superpowers for yourself, for your community, and for the world to continue to make it better. And that is my ask and my challenge to all of you. That is where I focus my work, where I oversee global diversity and inclusion at Twitter. And now I'm just going to go full on shameless plug. If you like what you've heard, we are hiring. So go to our careers site. And if you see a job that you like, slip into my DMs on Twitter and say, hey, here's a link. Here's why I think I would be the best fit for this job, because we are all in this together and we only succeed when we have each other's back. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you, James. And you said something about, you know, you being a Latinx, light skin, and I have 3 boys, and you know they are all so different. My oldest one, the one that is about to get married, he, you know, inherited my height. He's only 5'9". He's darker like I am. my other two boys are more like their mother, who is also Puerto Rican, but she's more, on the tall side, light fair skin, light hair. And I will always kind of thinking that one of my kids, how do I orient them? How do I make sure that they grow proud of being Latinos? And also, I was always watching, is one of my kids going to be gay? I want them to make sure that they embrace it and that they're okay with that. The three of them, apparently, they're all, straight. So I was a little bit disappointed, but maybe a grandchild someday will be, gay. But one of the things about this concept of intersectionality is like my oldest son, who happens to be, Latino, kind of looking more like me, but not straight. When he was a little kid, he was diagnosed with autism, right? So there's another thing that made him who he is today. And again, autism is a spectrum, so he was in the very light, and he's got a lot of, friends. He's getting married. I mean, he's like great life, went to college and everything else. But thinking about how all of us, this whole thing about intersectionality, it's not like I'm defined by being Hispanic or by being, gay or by, the socioeconomic condition, but there's so many micro things that shape who you are. And I think at the end of the day, and I think I was talking to Tajaro when I said this, at the end of the day, this uniqueness make us all more alike than different, right? So that's the beauty of this. And I think that's something that I would like people to internalize when they're thinking about how they can help us. So
the only thing I would add to that is on behalf of all the short kings out there, never say the words only 5'9". Okay. As long as you do that, we're good. Look, my husband and I have two little ones. We have a 3-year-old. We have a 1-year-old. The 1-year-old, part Latino, and he is blonde as the day. And what it serves like, and part of that is like, oh, I got a blondie. But it's a powerful reminder. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what's here. It matters what's here. This is cultura. This is your home. This is familia, and that's what brings us together. And I'm so grateful to be blessed with such healthy young little ones.
That's great. And I apologize for the comment about short. It's the unconscious bias,
I'm kidding.
I know. So, all right. So, okay. What about Myrna? You've been smiling a lot, so I want to hear from you.
Yes. Well, I'm going to start off by saying I qualify for the box that says vertically challenged. At 5 feet tall, no more than that, although I carry a big stick. So when you said only 5'9", I'm like, oh my God, I would kill to be 5'9". But anyhow, thank you for having me on this panel. Just a little bit of backdrop about Myrna. I love talking about myself in the third person. I have been a long-term member of this wonderful family called High Tech. I had the honor of serving as vice chairman for 10 years and termed out and allowed for others to take leadership roles on the board. But this is a very, very special organization to me. And I am so proud of them for putting this subject on the agenda. So thank you to High Tech. Thank you to Accenture for sponsoring it. I'll give you more of a personal background than a professional background, but I will mention my current professional work because it's very significant to our topic. So I was born and raised in South Florida, in Miami. I grew up in a very blue-collar immigrant neighborhood called Hialeah. And for those of you that are from Florida, you know exactly what I'm talking about. My mother is from Puerto Rico and my father is from Cuba. And at the time that we lived and grew up in Hialeah, it was 100% Cuban. I mean, there was nothing else there. And like many of us that have already shared, being part of this LGBTQ community was taboo. And it was not something that was celebrated at all. However, I had a very unique experience. I never felt like I had to come out. And you both mentioned your abuelas, and my abuela was just as astute and just knew. She just knew. And I think she became my advocate and whispered around the family to say, hey, listen, this is it. And it wasn't until I am married to my beautiful wife. I am married. It wasn't until I got married that my family and I actually had the conversation. They were always very accepting of whomever I was with at the time. And I'm speaking high school, junior high, high school, college. I felt that I had the freedom. I did not have the scrutiny in my household. I didn't feel like I had to get a boyfriend or I had to do certain things. So I do feel that I'm very blessed in that regard. But it was also still a little awkward because it just happened. We never talked about it. And it was kind of like, if you don't talk about it, we're fine. But there came a time when the Supreme Court said that marriage equality was going to be granted across the nation. And my wife and I, who we are celebrating 19 years together this year, said, we want to get married, legally get married. And we got married in 2016. And of course, the entire family was invited. And it was only then, believe it or not, 19 years together, it wasn't until then that I actually got a little nervous that my mother was going to see me at the altar marrying a woman. Although she knew all the other, relationships that I had been a part of. And never asked me, when are you going to get a boyfriend? Never. But it was a very unique experience. And the most special thing about my wedding was the number of high-techers that were at my wedding. This is truly one of my extended families, and I'm just honored that I can say that my wedding list, my guest list, was full of high-techers. And this has been the most accepting association in my entire professional career. So I'm just thrilled that we're talking about this today, that we have this incredible panel that have been pulled together, everyone who is non-apologetic, we know who we are. But one thing I'll leave you with before we move on, because I know I want to be sensitive to time, is that I'm honored by the fact that I currently serve on 4 corporate boards, 4 publicly traded organizations. I'm a big supporter of an organization called Out Leadership, which is an advocate for the LGBTQ community. And I just did a pride panel for that organization right before coming to this one. So we're very busy this month. It's a great thing. But also, I hate to say this number, a 30-year technology veteran. Do the math, I don't want to hear it. A 30-year technology veteran. And I welcome the opportunity to share some of my stories in tech and what it meant to be not only Latina, but also gay.
Thank you. That was wonderful. You talked about we share a wedding year because my husband and I got married in 2016. And one thing that is interesting is that you never felt that you needed to come out. I vividly remember when I came out to my mother. Of all the people, it was even harder than my wife to come out to my mother. And again, as I mentioned before, it's that cultural thing and the memory of my father. And she's like, oh my God, you're gonna burn in hell and people are gonna hate you. I think she was so afraid of how family will see me. And I'm like, Mother, I'm successful. I've always been independent on my own. Do you think I care, right? But to make a long story short though, I did tell her, you have 2 choices. You can accept me for who I am, and we'll have the relationship that we used to have when I was young and we were very close. Or you can continue with this, and then I'll call you on Mother's Day and tell you what you need to know. And she chose the former, and our relationship is better than ever. And the other funny thing is that, my wife, when I was married, and my mother didn't get along. It must be that Latina woman's, thing. But all of my previous boyfriends and partner and my husband, he adores my mother and my mother adores him. So it's a great story all on. So I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna ask Jonathan to share his journey with us.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Medina. I'm the head of inclusion and diversity for APACS. I am super excited to be here with all of you. I am a gay Dominican man. I came to the US about 27 years ago, which at the time was really difficult for me because speaking English was something that I really, really struggled with. And when I think about how being Latino, right, in Washington Heights and in New York and in New Jersey really shaped who I am and kind of shaped the trajectory of what I interacted with, what my opportunities were as someone that grew up very poor, right? I then layer that over the fact that I was LGBTQ, right? I'm a gay man. So how difficult is that? And this concept that most often, right, when you're looking for a man or a woman or whatever as a partner, you're looking to check multiple boxes. But in the field of intersectionality, the more boxes you check, the more alone you are, right? So it kind of flips it on its head a little bit. And what I often found is that we are all trying to be better for our communities. So as Latinos, or Latinx and Hispanics, we're trying to be better for our community. As folks of the LGBTQ plus community, we're trying to do better for that, for our people. However, when we pull on sides and make our factions, our groups smaller and smaller, and don't actually take a hold of that intersectionality and those things that make us and unique, we actually do all of our communities a disservice. And that's actually, Jamie, why this is so important to me. And it's actually why when I was talking with Omar and Nelly, as we were beginning to bring APACS into the high-tech fold as a sponsor, I asked the question, what are we doing about LGBTQ intersectionality, right? Because it's so important for us to exercise the privilege that we have. I recognize that I am a cisgendered, able-bodied man, right? And there's so much privilege that comes to that. And I need to figure out how to exercise that. And what I'd ask all of you that are out there to think about, whether you fall in the Latinx camp or whatever camp you fall into, think about what you can do differently tomorrow to exercise that voice and expand that even further to say, what can your companies do? I know at APACS, one of the things that we're doing more and more is asking the question, what are you doing for these communities we care about? We're at the beginning of our journey and we embrace that. And truthfully, there's a lot of work to be done. But at the end of the day, if we don't put our kind of money where our mouth is or don't put our actions first, we'll never be able to make our communities better. So excited to be here with you all. I can tell you a little bit later about how my mother thought, you know, when I came out, it was a mistake. And I came back to her and I used my Catholic upbringing and my knowledge of the Bible to say it actually wasn't a mistake. But that's a story for another day, possibly, or another moment. Jamie, back to you.
Thank you, thank you. Do we need drinks for that story, Jonathan? I suppose we do. So that's great. So thank you for sharing that with us. I think that, you know, this is the point of this conversation, is to, you know, share those experiences, because to your point, you know, intersectionality, to what you said, the more boxes you check, the more, you know, the steeper the road ahead, really, frankly, you know, because the more biases and other things that you're going to encounter. But as I said before, I hope that this is where we're headed. And, you know, having, you know, young sons and knowing how they, you know, react to this and how their friends react to this, I do feel that we are on the right trajectory, right? Like every time in history, we take 2 steps forward, 1 back, and then we keep moving forward. But I think that we are all recognizing, as I said before, that we are all unique because we all check several different boxes that nobody, you know, our unique, you know, mix of ingredients cannot be repeated any place else, right? We are who we are, and we are unique, and there's nobody else like us. And I think that's a message that is powerful for everybody, right? So I am hopeful and optimistic that that's how, you know, things are going to continue to evolve. But it is up to all of us, the folks listening to this conversation, to help us make that a reality, right? So, all right. So let's move on to another question. It's the same thing about the story, but a little bit of a different tilt, if you will. So now that you are all leaders, right? You're in great leadership positions, members of boards, etc., you have a lot of influence in your organizations. You have a lot of influence on your communities. So what are you doing personally to drive a more inclusive culture and to give back to your community? And what is your organization? And I think James did a little bit of a plug there already, but what is your organization doing as well? So let's start with Jonathan. Let's have you continue on your role.
Yeah, so in my role, I have responsibility for kind of three things, right? One is making sure that our company APAX is all about being inclusive and is diverse. We have a slew of portfolio companies that we shepherd, and the idea is to help them become more diverse. Likewise, the boards that they serve. So essentially, what we strive to do is thread the needle across, right? We try, as I said, to break down the factions, to really bring things together, because the more we operate kind of with the end in mind, and that end is inclusion for everyone, the better we can do. So what does that mean in practice? In practice, that means that our people need to input inclusion and diversity, embed inclusion and diversity into our investment decision making, right? They need to push that board to be diverse, right? We have a very specific lens on executives within our portfolio companies and the diversity of them all. So part of what they've asked me to do is to really take a look and make opportunities available to folks like all of you out there that are really capable, that are really strong, that might not otherwise have gotten a position to get 4 boards like Myrna has, right? Or be on 4 boards, or just even serve as a C-level executive. So what I do personally, and this is now a really personal passion of mine, if you can't quite tell, is break down those barriers of opportunity. And the only way to do that is chiseling one piece at a time in our recruiting processes and our performance processes. And I'm enjoying every minute of it.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. And again, a lot of those things, I mean, great companies do great things, right? As being part of Accenture, we are doing a lot of that. It's the recruitment, but it's the promotion, it's the retention, it's making sure that inclusion, is from the moment you come into the door to the moment in which you retire from the company. So thank you for sharing that. Myrna, what about you?
Well, I don't think we're going to have enough time because the list is long. And why I say that is because each and every one of us carry a very significant responsibility that we should never stop in our advocacy. And that's my point. But I've been blessed with the fact that I have worked with a number of organizations and have held senior leadership roles where I've been able to be the executive sponsor for a number of diversity and inclusion efforts, where I've been part of, in my most recent role at ForcePoint, as an example, where we build out the entire allyship program. And I think that is a really important element, because we've all said it in one way or another that we got to make sure that we don't disenfranchise others, and that we make sure that we are embracing not only our own community, but those that are supportive of us. So for me, it was really important to build that allyship, to really focus on the fact that people needed to learn, and it sounds so elementary, but I had a great interaction recently with someone who happened to be doing the moderation of a panel in support of diversity and inclusion during Pride Month. And the person said to me, Myrna, I don't know what to say. Like, what do I call you guys? How do I refer to you? And I said, you know what? The fact that you're asking I will give you a tremendous amount of empathy if you happen to just misstep, because you actually care enough to ask, you care enough to seek understanding. And that's a really important factor that I have focused virtually my entire professional career around, making sure that that element of inclusion, seeking understanding, questioning, learning, the minute we learn more about each other, it's the soonest that we find out that we're very much alike, that we have a lot of common traits, and that united, we are much stronger than with any bifurcation. But last but not least, is I'm carrying that now into the boardroom. So I'm looking at, every single one of my organizations that I serve on their boards are very strong champions. They have become, some have become and some were. And I've had the great pleasure. It's kind of an interesting element where I was recruited for these boards and none of them knew that I was a member of the LGBTQ community until after I joined the board. And that's a whole other discussion, a whole other debate. But it solidified the fact that they got to know me professionally, got to know me personally. And when that element became real and revealed, it was immediately embraced. So we have to, although we're asking for a lot for people to be our allies, we also have to ask a lot of ourselves to make sure that we make people understand we're just like everybody else.
Absolutely. And we are asking for a lot, but we are asking for the right things, right? So we should,
Absolutely.
confident in asking, right? So great. Thank you. Tahar, what about you? You're on mute.
I echo the same sentiment that Myrna and Jonathan are saying, but the two things that I can, where I've been championing our community on the personal front or through the economic, I serve on the Austin LGBT chamber where I am the chair of the supply diversity. And that's when I walk into Tesla's office, I walk into Fortune 100 companies, and behind the scenes, there is an accountability for the ecosystem for those LGBTBEs. That's those LGBT certified companies. Shouldering them up, providing programs to how to make business. They go talk to to scale for success. So there are many systems and program on the business front. And also on the personal front, I sit on the chair of one of the largest universities out of San Diego. And they're building that pipeline for professionals to make sure that the institutions are providing that relative education so that companies from my level of a small business all the way to the Fortune 100 companies, those and empowered to add value to the workforce. Last but not least, being what bigger thing to do step. I did lose one or two clients, but that was okay. And so putting that label on my company, LGBT, it is a symbol and it says loudly that you are included without even saying anything. It is action that is louder than our words. And so those two things, because I'm eager to hear what James have to say, but those are the two ways that I showed up our community in action and in intentions.
Thank you, Tahar. Last but not least, James, bring us home.
Oh, I know we're short on time, so I'm not going to talk about what I do or how I do it. If you're interested, check out my Twitter profile, my LinkedIn, there's a long list. I'm going to talk about why I do it. And it's about privilege. And I know coming out of 2020, that word can be very charged. So I want to take a moment to explain it. Privilege is something that is universal. We all have it. It is not to suggest special advantages or benefits that were conferred on us that made our lives easy. It was about the lack of extraordinary barriers that made getting to where we are today virtually impossible. And I recognize the privileges that I have as a light-skinned, cisgender, able-bodied man. And I see that as an obligation to center the experiences of those who may not be in the spaces and in the rooms that I currently am. And that goes far beyond the LGBTQ plus community, because as we've talked about here, we are all intersectional. We are so many things. And so our advocacy within the LGBTQ plus community has the opportunity and requires that we recognize that as humans, our struggles are connected. And if last year reminded us of anything, it's that now more than ever, we have to stand together against hatred and violence in all of its forms. So not just transphobia and homophobia and biphobia, but also racism and misogyny and xenophobia and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and ableism. Because if we can truly leverage whatever privilege we were born with to accomplish those goals, we will all move forward together.
Great words. Thank you, James. Thank you, the panelists, for an amazing, experience. I had quite a great experience just listening to you guys and comparing notes, right? I hope that the audience here, I hope that you leave this session inspired, right? That these stories are going to move you to get involved, to be an ally, as Sonia was saying, and to do better, right? So with that, again, I want to thank the panel and I want to thank everybody, and have a wonderful rest of the forum today.